Alice, welcome to Future Speak.
We talk about employees performing in roles, but we need to obviously provide the environment for them to perform the most effectively in.
You and I've only had a couple of conversations actually, but I was really interested and actually inspired on your views, both in terms of the future of work and the work that you're doing. You're founder of Peony Magnolia. You've also got your own magazine, and I know that you just started your own podcast journey too. But there's no one better to introduce yourself than you. Please do introduce yourself to everyone and let us know who you are and a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. That is right. I do have a HR consultancy. I often open it with saying it's not a florist. When people say, why have you called it after two flowers? There is a reason behind that. There is madness behind all of that. But and I do talk about that when I talk about my brand and my values and why I've named it after two flowers. Yes, and 2001, no, not 2001, 2021, I launched Espresso, and that is a collaboration project which really set off being something that I just wanted a platform to be able to have my voice and for us to be able to talk about topics I felt that people weren't talking around. And what that has done is snowballed into a lovely collaboration project, which then became an e-magazine, and lots of people contribute their voices and their views on whatever we're discussing. The underlining theme of each of those issues is one of my company values. So I keep bringing it back to why we do things in the way that we do at Peony Magnolia. But yes, I am a HR professional, have been for many years, and set the business up just over 3 years ago now.
Fantastic. We've had some interesting discussions, you and I, in the past about the future of work. And I know that one of the things that's really important to you is bold leadership and that authenticity, which frankly, and again, you and I have talked about the fact that words, some of these words are now actually highly overused, so therefore there's less significance with them now. Future of work is actually one of them, because the future of work is here now. And again, I know that's something that you and I have talked about. When you hear that phrase, the future of work, what does it mean to you?
Well, initially, my brain works in the way that I have to dump words onto paper, and then it comes into some kind of content or something a bit more concise. And when you first asked this question, I was like, wow, this is a really big question to answer, actually. And I got to the point where I think the future of work needs us to stop and look back, because we're always striving to improve things where sometimes we haven't stopped and thought about the things that did work really well already. Now, I can be a bit old school traditional, I guess, with some of my HR thinking, in the sense that we often pick up the newest trend. Let's run with talking around diversity, but let's not, maybe, like you say, our talk doesn't actually go into actions. I don't want to continuously be on the new trend in HR and it doesn't have an impact. So when I talk about the future of work, I actually stopped and thought about, let's go back. Let's think about what I feel is quite important. And my brain actually went back to when I completed my master's in HR. I did a dissertation on employer and employee branding. Now, at the time, and that was 2008, 2009, so right in the middle of the financial crisis, so, recession point, so topical in the sense of where we might heading as well. I was working in a global marketing team at the time, not in HR, but was wanting to look around the connection between the brand that you externally promote and actually how that reflects within the workplace. It was quite difficult to find research at the time. And so I had to go maybe only 5 or 6 years before they started talking around employee value proposition. And so that's where my brain's got to, Sarah, in this conversation is I think the future of work is stopping and really considering from a HR point of view or from a business point of view is what do your employees add as value in your business, and what does that actually mean? So that's where I think the future of work should be going, is stopping and pausing and reviewing at the moment.
Interesting. And when you talk about that stopping and pausing and reviewing, what's your role in all of this, and how is that going to change and morph over the coming years?
Well, probably with experience and age comes the fact that we've been through these cycles previously. And I suppose my role, I feel, could be a little bit in a coaching, mentoring capacity to other HR professionals and also to business owners. So there are business owners who, if you're thinking about what your product is offering to the world at the moment, are they refining what that product is? Are they trying to find savings in production of it? You know, they're thinking around that from a cost point of view. From my point of view, actually, I want to do the same in your business with the employees that you have at the moment. So let's look at each individual. Let's see what they contribute to the business. Let's see what skill sets they have. Let's see, actually, if you want a new product design, let's work out who you have in the business already that can support you. Because we know at the moment attracting talent is incredibly difficult, especially in some sectors. You know, the tech sector, I've worked with a couple of tech businesses and startups, incredibly difficult to get the skill set, and also very difficult to attract into a startup from a larger business as well. So actually, maybe this is the point where my role is, let's look at the people that you have whilst you've got time. So when you're not in crisis mode, when we're not talking around resizing or restructuring or taking out roles, let's look at it now when there's maybe a bit of stability and see what skills you actually have and what talent you have in the business already.
And there's an interesting point to all of this, isn't there? Which is, and the old-fashioned view is very much, what can the employee bring to the business? What is their contribution? And you touched on it there, Alice, which is, what does the business contribute to that individual? How are you seeing organisations really get to grips with this and understand that they have a fundamental part too when it comes to talent, both the attraction and the retention piece?
Yes, and again, I suppose I thought about this recently, because when we talk about employees performing in roles, but we need to obviously provide the environment for them to perform the most effectively in. And we talk, you know, there's a lot around where we work at the moment. Hybrid working is a huge conversation. Like I said, this is almost a never-ending conversation, really, Sam, isn't it? But yes, actually, how does the business support the employee to be able to get the best out of them? Well, it can be, right, obviously from the start. So this is the engagement side, isn't it? It's letting the employee have their voice or contribute their voice, but make sure it's heard. So when we talk about continuous improvement in businesses, there's no point having a feedback box, which nobody actually looks in, or there's no point having an employee survey and all you do is look at the stats and go, oh, we knew there was a problem area over there. Talk needs to go into action. So I think if employees are contributing, are being loyal to a business, they're trusting their careers within that business. So we're asking business owners to make sure that relationship is mutual. We're asking them to say, well, if you've been bold and brave enough to come forward with, it could be a grievance or it could be, you know, a continuous improvement or something. If you've come forward with that, then as a business, we are listening and we are able then to take action. That may not be immediate action, but even recognition that somebody has brought something forward into the business and they feel like they're contributing is where I feel the cultures that work really well will just thrive in the next couple of years.
It's interesting, isn't it? I read a report this morning before I came into the studio, and it was saying that 80% of employees from a recent survey still don't feel that they're being listened to. And yet we're aware of so many organisations doing, just as you said, they're doing these surveys. They are telling us that they are listening. They are working with professionals like yourself to make a change, to go about that. Where, in your opinion, is this disconnect?
I think some of it's lip service. I think that, you know, there are, maybe that's a bit unfair. I think that there are some businesses who feel what they are doing is the right thing, that they're gathering the data. But what they're not doing then is anything around it. Maybe they don't have the skill sets. Maybe they're not, again, you can look at your survey results and you can see there's a disconnect. But if there are other areas of the business that need attention before that area, the priority list goes down. But what actually that means is the risk level of those niggles increases. So it comes to the point, and we see it in business, where the crunch point happens and everyone says, well, we've been telling you this, but you've not been doing anything about it. So I think it's understanding the time of when you need to address them. Do I feel that actually sometimes it's lip service? Yes, I do. I think my statement was probably right in the first place. I do feel that some people say, we do all of these things. But this is where it goes back to my original thinking around the EVP and, the employee branding. If you don't say what you actually do on the tin, actually inside the culture of it, it's just a bluff. It's a bluff for the stakeholders. It's a bluff for your customers. And we see this all the time when people exit businesses. They put a scathing kind of review on Glassdoor or something. And then, there's a crisis within the business of how do we get that taken down, when they know full well that that probably is the truth. It's just that they haven't wanted to listen to that at the time.
A lot of organisations now who are seeing their people more as a peer-to-peer, as a partnership, and almost a sort of a client in their own right, because they recognise the fact that they're not going to keep this talent for years and years. And actually, that's not a bad thing. How are you seeing, just across the SME market, that mind shift with how employers are interacting with their teams? And I chose my words carefully there.
I think if you're a business, which is an SME, and you are going through either a growth stage or what I call like the adolescent stage, where everybody gets it's a bit of friction going on within the business, you will see certain people leaving. You absolutely will, because they will think the grass is greener, or they want to go to a bigger organisation. They are people that potentially have been with the business from the start. And when we kind of flip that round, and I've worked in businesses where people have exited and they've come back again. And actually, again, when I was thinking around this whole theme of the conversation, the irony is that when we're attracting people into our business, we offer them, we say, this is what is on offer, this is the benefits. You come in, we're all on our best behaviour when we're in interview stage. We've got hopefully an onboarding or induction, probation reviews, first 3-6 months, someone's there holding your hand. What happens in between then is actually you're left on your own device. And that's where people wobble. So that's through the employee cycle. So what we need to do is create much more of a mentoring coaching environment. But actually the flip side is what I thought around was that when people decide to exit the business, now maybe through their own decision or not, but there is a point where people disengage. Now you can pull people back from that point, but it's at that point that when people are leaving the business, you actually have a relationship with them already. You've already established that relationship. You've got a loyalty. You've got a trust. And often they just, oh, well, you've resigned. Here's your letter. Here's how many days holiday you've got. This is when you'll be paid. You might be lucky that there's an exit interview, but what happens with that exit interview? And I think people seem to forget that once that person leaves the business, they are an external ambassador for your business. They're still a stakeholder. They've been part of the journey. And with smaller businesses in particular, reputation is such an important factor. So I think, going back to your question, how can small businesses sort of retain or support the talent? I think it's okay for talent to leave. I think as long as they go on feeling like it's the right time for them to have left. And I think it's okay for people to go back into small businesses, because the business will be at a different stage and the person themselves, their own development will be potentially at a different stage. So I don't think it needs to be a definite sort of end. I think it can be a bit more grey in between.
Exactly. And obviously the bigger companies are doing it really well, right? They have their alumni. And when I think of back in my corporate days, I'm still part of the Goldman Sachs alumni. When I left Goldman Sachs in excess of 25 years ago, but I'm still invited. I know what's happening. I'm still very much part of that community. And we're realizing now that, just as you said, oh, you're going, well, that's it. Our relationship's done, is very short-sighted. And the smaller businesses now catching up, recognizing the fact that, hey, listen, how do we fit into your career? Let's talk about it. Let's have that open dialogue. So, it's no surprise when you leave. Stay interviews, right? These are great things. How are you seeing stay interviews being used? Is that the right thing? Are there other things?
I think it's very much dependent on the individual. And again, I can talk about an experience, when I was in-house, as well as sort of outside, got the both sides of it. And I would have many young lads, and they were young lads because it was a construction and rail business that I was HRD in. And they would be frustrated. There would have been something happened on site. There would have been something on the particular project. But the fact that they were coming and talking to me and saying, oh, this is, they've got their own managers. They've got, I've got a team of HR people, but I was sort of a trusted sounding board for people to come and listen to. And sometimes I would just ask the question and, what is it that's going to make you happy in your job? Because if it's going to a larger business and the market's quite small, the industry is small, so everybody knows each other, going to a different sized business might be beneficial for you at that time, because what you want is some training or development that we just cannot offer at this point in time. It could be that actually it's just a frustration of disorganisation, which is something that can be easily resolved. So those sort of stay conversations they need to be bespoke for the person and the situation. Obviously, sometimes, Sam, it's on the flip side that people can be coming to you continuously saying, and actually you know that person really should be leaving the business. Now, from a HR point of view, you can't obviously say that, but you can enable them or give them the questions that they can take back and think about of where they want their careers to go. So there's a real fine line. And actually, again, that comes down to experience, because, the old school, let's take a walk around the car park and have a chat. Let's not have those conversations anymore. That makes me a bit, flustered. But let's actually have those conversations, but in a more kind of transparent way, really.
Yeah. And one of the things you talked about right at the beginning of this conversation was the fact that you are also keen to work and support other HRs in terms of the in-house HRs as we evolve and see continuous changes in the workforce. How do you see your role in supporting the in-house HRs evolving over the next couple of years?
There were quite a few times in my own career that I've felt like, wouldn't it be lovely to have a HRD sat on my shoulder, or here's a project I'd really like to outsource to somebody, because there's only so many things you can do at one point in time, even if you've got a team around you. So that's always been my sort of, wouldn't it be nice if? And so I think that there are, and I have had these conversations with other HRs of the peers. Yes, it'd be lovely if you could come in and just help us sort that bit through. So it's just being a thinking partner, a sounding board. Now that can be somebody that's in-house HR professional, or it could be a consultant, because that's the other thing, is that for me, and I guess that goes back to my collaboration conversation to begin with, is that working with somebody isn't competition, it's collaboration. Yeah. My experience comes from my own career, my own pathway. It's really good to actually sit and talk to another HR professional about things, and yes, I suppose maybe that comes with a confidence in your own abilities to be able to do that. I'm not sure, but actually just asking the questions and working together, I think is how we share our knowledge and our skills. So yes, you're in exactly the same as if you're in a business and actually you're a standalone HR manager. You may be feeling very out of your depth in quite a few areas at the moment. And actually, I've had this conversation around, who do you market your business to? Sometimes it's not those HR people, because they don't recognise themselves they don't recognise that they actually need that support.
Fair.
It's just maybe suggesting that, that bit that's sort of keeping you up at night, we can deal with that. And this is how we can deal with it. It's offering those solutions. And I suppose it very much depends on the individual and the business. But those that are open to that level of support, that's how I feel I can help contribute. Because you go and you set the seeds, you set the tone off, you set a project going. It's the skills within that business need to take that forward. They might call on you again to come backwards and forwards, but the likelihood is that you're not there all the time. You're there to help them solve a problem.
Yeah, and to your point about collaboration is something we've seen grow exponentially since the pandemic. And certainly, new networks have been created. How we work, where we find our talent has all completely changed. The one thing I find fascinating around this conversation, and having been to so many events recently, is not once has the word technology come in. And it really emphasises the fact that we're very much still about the human. There's a big debate right now around how much technology is going to take over. Personally, I think it's been there to enhance what we do, to enable us to put the human back into human resources. What are your thoughts on that?
I quite like reading stats. And I think that's one of the things that for myself, that's how I keep my brain, more up to date. But I read just recently, and I'll find you the link and send it to you, Sam. But it was around that they think technology, the impact or the investment in technologies and businesses will impact about 10 to 11% of HR roles going forward. Now, if I think about that, that's probably the entry-level transactional roles. Now, I talk about that because it's my nuts and bolts. I understand how that functions. Now, there are going to be people who are, and I support lots of young people in their careers, the grassroots side of things, who will be thinking about going into HR, working with people, working as an expert in the business on that side. Now, the likelihood is technology is going to be taking away what would have been the traditional roles of providing information for board reports, getting the HR metrics up to date. Technology is there already to support that. So what we need is actually those entry-level roles to be analytical thinkers. So what we're actually asking those people is to have a different skill set so that they can use technology to their advantage, that we then have more information in the business. So that's what I would be encouraging, if you're going to be entry level of HR, is to do that. Now, I've always had a team of people that I did have a brilliant team. We had a brilliant team. And when somebody gave me the data, I knew it was correct. So I didn't have to question it. And I knew it was correct because I knew she was really precise. And I knew she knew that I also liked the details to be correct. Because if I'm the one in a meeting or a boardroom and I get challenged on it, then I can then bring the conversation and the context around it. So when that person's not there, so I trust that person. When it's the technology, have I still got that same trust in a report just spurting out data to me? I don't know, because there's margins of error, and I know there's human error, but I know in that particular case, that person will have triple checked it before I've given it to me. So you're right. There's a fine line, isn't there, around getting the right skill set and using technology in the right way, but then also kind of investing in that analytical and problem-solving skill set that I think that we haven't used as much because we've relied on technology to give us the answers. My children always say, "Oh, Mum, just search it, Google it up for us." I was like, no, we're going to work it out, because our brain, that's part of our brain, isn't working in the way it used to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. When I look back at school, no calculators allowed in your maths exams, right? And you say that to a kid now, they'd be mortified. You've got that whole thing about, you say to someone, "Have you ever used a telex or a fax?" And they'll look at you and go, "Huh?"
We were talking about this the other day. My first role was in recruitment. I loved it. I managed a big account here at Bacon Woodrow, and we used to have to wait on a Friday for the timesheets to be faxed through so I could manually check them and then fax them to head office. I mean, just now looking back at the the amount of paperwork that we processed. But we were also at that point matching CVs. I was reading a printed CV and matching people, where technology has taken all of that part away. But then actually, does it really give you that, well, that's an interesting point. Does it read beneath between the lines of somebody's CV? Probably not. You still need a person to be able to do that. But look, Sam, the technology enables us to do so many more things. Flexible working in the way that we operate now wouldn't have been achievable if we didn't have the tech that is in place now. So yes, there are huge advantages to it, but I think it should come with like a caution, like a warning, like you still got a brain, let's use it.
Exactly. Alice, now for the fun part.
Oh, okay.
What was your last Netflix binge?
It was From Scratch, I think it is. It's just a series that's out at the moment. It's actually been adapted from a book, so I'm a big reader. And the Hello Sunshine, that production business, it's a very good. I actually watch very little television, and so the fact that I've just seen that is a plus. But yes, I if I'm lucky, I'm about 5 years behind on most of the things on Netflix. I'm terrible at catching up. So yeah, but that was good. Very good.
Well, noted. I haven't heard of that one. So, I guess in summary, when you look back at our conversation today, what would you want someone listening to this on a podcast to take away from our conversation when they're thinking about the future of work, if they're not close to it like you and I are?
I think that people, like I said at the start, need to, instead of chasing the next thing, I think we just need to stop. We need to stop. If you employ people already, you need to really look at how that relationship is. Healthy relationships are built on trust. They're built on good communication, constructive communication.
Yeah.
If it's a quiet company, that's also potentially not good. You want people to be using their voice. So I think if you're going to be really thinking about the future of work or how you're going to look at your workforce planning, because, if you're going to go from a HR point of view, we look at your skill sets, your talents, how you're engaging people, what kind of headcounts we're going to be needing in the future. If you're going to be doing all of that, I think you also need to stop and really think about, if you're a leader, are you being that bold leader, Sam? Are you actually saying and acting in the way that you really, really should be? So I think that's stopping, checking yourself, and also maybe really thinking about the conscious decisions you're making, but the unconscious decisions you're making as well. So, if you want to save costs, well, what we'll do is we'll reduce down the employee insurances. It used to be up to retirement age, but we'll bring it down to 5 years. That's because you're saving money, but actually that decision potentially could impact one of your employees in the future. So it's making conscious decisions for your business. And then I think what that will do is give you a really good grounding that you have genuinely invested in your stakeholders. It's not for today's conversation, but when we talk about, the social part of ESG and the stakeholders, there's a whole conversation going on there that is not being picked up yet. So yeah, that would be my kind of point, is stop, think, reassess, and be bold in how you're kind of going forward, even if it isn't a cost saving part, but actually just being bold in the decisions that you're making.
I love that. The bold piece and that stop and think. For a parallel thinker who's all action, very hard for me to do, and I appreciate it because I have to stay present to do that. Alice, I want to say thank you so much for coming on to Future Speak today. I was really excited to have you on because you've always contributed so much to the HR community. My ears pricked up again with when we talked about ESG. I know we haven't got time today, but hey, fancy coming on season 4?
It would be lovely, actually, yes. And I am actually recording a podcast with somebody else on it. So yes, Sam, I will come and talk happily about it.
Great. Well, Alice, thank you. It's been a pleasure seeing you today.
And you, Sam. Thank you very much.